Welcome, this is my project on motion artifacts in MRI. Motions have been a problem in MRI since the beginning of its invention. This article covers some of the origins and current solutions that are used to prevent and fix some of the motions that happen during a scan. This is a big problem, motion with MRI, because of the length of the scan, and the acquisition time with which it gathers the data is so long as compared to an ultrasound or a CT scan, which doesn't have that. Some of the artifacts that are seen through motion are blurring and ghosting. Blurring, obvious by its title, the edges become blurred, but ghosting is seen in images here G, N, and O, or at least prevalently, where you can see a replication of the entire image. It's akin to the wraparound aliasing, but it's not the same. Here in the top left, you can see the original phantom, and then the next three images are as follows: a rotation of about 10 degrees, a translation up and down, and then a translation left and right. Images E through H are representations of how these would be captured, these same images, if we were to use a photography setting with a long exposure time. We're comparing the differences in the effects. Then on I through L, we have the same scan that was done on A through D, except we've now acquired the data through an interleaved sampling scheme. We can see that, and similarly with M through P, you can see that some of the aliasing and ghosting is aggravated in different settings, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. Motion can happen either sudden or continuous and slow. Slow continuous motion, called drifting, is actually less sensitive in an MRI than normal photography with a long exposure time. Drifting occurs when muscles relax over time in a clinical setting, and using interleaved approaches, as you can see on E through H, this is really harsh on the imaging. However, with Cartesian sampling, you can see on the top row, it is not as detrimental to the images. How are we going to solve this problem? By advancing the hardware, gradient strengths have improved and let us image the patient faster by moving through case-space more efficiently. Due to the better quality of the image, we're able to produce better SNR in images, which is great. However, it means that small motions and even subtle ones will make a larger impact on the quality of the data. So as we make advances in our technology, there's this trade-off. As we increase our SNR, we're more sensitive. As we increase the gradient strength, we have a phase accumulation. And as we increase field strength, our scan volume changes. There's going to be no magic tool that will fix all of the different issues with motion in MR. As we've learned in our course and is illustrated in this paper, collecting the data for the MRI is time consuming as we move through case space to acquire it. It's interesting that since different details in case space are from the sharpness and the smoothness of the different edges, impacts in case space from motion can affect the entire image. This is very challenging when trying to allocate what kind of a translation or what kind of a rotation and what the impact has. However, through the Fourier transform, we're able to visualize what those changes are. I wanted to talk a little bit about the different types of motion. Rigid body can be modeled through mathematical parameters using 3 equations for rotation and 3 for translation. These are shifting and translating your head back and forth. Elastic motion takes about 12 different parameters to be able to mathematically model the type of motion. These are often seen in the abdomen, where you have many things that are moving and stretching, compressing, and shearing in different directions. As far as flow goes, velocity from liquid motion is usually seen by 1 or 2 different parameters, helps to model the blood or the CSF in a patient. These would be optimally viewed in a complete representation through what's called a displacement field, which shows how each particle would move. These are, however, not always able to be produced. There are different ways in which the data gets corrupted from motion. Some of these, like the phase accumulation is seen on the top right image, we can see that when scanned without motion and when with motion, the spin phases are out of alignment. Other examples of excitation history you can see on the image to its immediate left, that on the top row, the same slice in the brain gets excited at each successive interval, whereas when we have a rotation or a translation rotation, these different sections of the brain get scanned and excited, and it's not homogeneous. Other issues with inconsistency readout directions. If we've rotated in space, you can see on the bottom image that we're not going to acquire the data how we think we will be acquiring it. Having faster imaging sequences, we can increase the probability that the spontaneous motions won't be a part of the immediate scan window when we're acquiring data. In cardiac imaging, by increasing the sequencing speed, this helps us to gain more data in each small gated window that is acquired. However, the trade-off is that there will be a limited spatial resolution. There's no free lunch is a common phrase in this field. With parallel imaging, allows the scan time to be reduced by 2 to 3 times. However, this is dependent on the calibration of the coils. And similarly with compressed sensing, it's led to the ability to implement compensated motion applications, but they have a trade-off is that new different types of artifacts have been seen. Motion correction sequences has been implemented by applying what's called a navigator to the acquisition phase. By adding an extra pulse that's ultra short, about millisecond range, helps to acquire positional information in cardiac and brain imaging. These have even been improved to do self-navigating methods. Here's an image of the propeller method, which helps to know where you are in MR scan data just by its data itself. Alternatively, you can use what's called prospective correction by using cameras, RF probes, and inboard cameras to be able to watch for motion as it happens in real time and changing the gradients and encoding along with that to help keep the image free from motion. Another method is called post-processing or retrospective correction, where they use the data that has been acquired with motion and use the navigators to learn and change the motions that have been done. Here's a case-based learning approach that's approached this year, and you can see the different things that my research group has been able to do by correcting these motions. Here are some of my sources. Thank you so much.